every single day, like I've always done and always will.
Making yet another stand.
Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Chantel Destra. Since the beginning of the legislative session, addressing the state's housing crisis has continued to be a major focus of both the governor and legislature. After weeks of negotiations, this year's state budget included a housing plan complete with provisions to bring affordable housing to New York City by way of a tax incentive program for real estate developers. The plan also included a scaled-down version of the Good Cause Eviction Tenant Protection Bill. The version of the bill in the budget is structured as an opt-in program for local municipalities across the state. We sat down with State Senator Brian Kavanagh, who is the chair of the Senate Committee on Housing, Construction, and Community Development, for a deep dive on the state's approach to housing in the budget. Here's that conversation. Thank you so much for meeting with me, Senator.
It's great to be here.
Now, naturally, I wanted to start on the housing deal in the budget. I think coming into the session, it was clear that housing would be a very big issue. The governor had an idea of how to approach housing, and the legislature had, your own idea. So how would you describe the overall negotiation process in the budget as it relates to housing this year?
So I think this year the governor focused in her executive budget particularly on some provisions that were intended to increase supply of housing, and particularly in New York City. So some of the tax breaks there that encourage developers to build and to include affordability in their projects. Some provisions that are intended to facilitate the conversion of commercial buildings to residential, and some other provisions that were about the density of housing in New York. The legislature and the Senate in particular greatly expanded the menu of things we wanted to consider. So we added some very strong tenant protections. We added some increases in money for circumstances where tenants or homeowners are facing housing instability. And we also added a variety of capital programs that we think are necessary, particularly to ensure that the package had statewide effect. There was a lot of emphasis. There's always been a lot of emphasis in New York City, and obviously a lot of our economy and a lot of our residents live in New York City. But we really have tried in recent years to make sure that we are addressing the needs of all parts of the state. And the other big thing that the legislature pushed for, which we didn't get as much traction on as we would have liked, is assistance for people to actually pay the rent or in existing housing. So that's going to be, I think, a continuing conversation. But overall, I think it was a good comprehensive package as a result of all parties putting forth a wide range of things. And I think it's very, very, very meaningful and comprehensive what we actually did.
And on tenant protections, the version of the Good Cause Eviction Bill that made it into the budget, of course, wasn't necessarily exactly as the original one. There was a lot of carve out. So do you think it is enough to appease tenant advocates at this juncture?
Yeah, I'm not so much interested in appeasing folks as making the best public policy. And good cause eviction, for people who may not be familiar, is the notion that you shouldn't be evicted from your home without a good reason. That if a landlord wants to end your tenancy, they need to meet conditions, a series of reasons that are good reasons to remove somebody, including not paying their rent, or doing damage to the property, or otherwise violating your lease in a significant way. And there are some other exceptions we added as well. So I, for a number of years now, have favored doing that as broadly as possible. The bill that we actually did has two kinds of limitations. One is we limited certain housing accommodations that are effectively exempted from it. Housing accommodations owned by small landlords, defined as landlords who own 10 or fewer units total in the state, and also certain kinds of housing, like housing in co-ops or condos, is excluded. The other thing we did is made it so that it takes effect immediately in New York City, but we would permit any town or village or city to opt into the protections by a simple vote of their local governing body. And so people who are listening to this who don't live in New York City who would like these protections should be working with their local governments and local advocates to try to get this enacted in their jurisdiction, and then it'll take effect there as well.
And the tax incentive program and the tenant protection program will both expire in a decade. Can you tell us a little bit about how that was determined?
Yeah, I think Albany is sort of addicted to what we call sunsets. We work hard to pass these things, and then we have them sunset, which kind of requires some future legislature to take a look and rethink it and see if it still makes sense. I think looking at things to see they make sense is fine. I think we can do that with all laws regardless of whether they sunset. So I don't think it was necessary, but I think 10 years is a very, often these things sunset every couple of years or every 3 years or every 4 years. So I think for the next decade, these things will be in place. And I think, it might be the role of some other folks in the legislature 10 years from now to figure out how they want to change it or extend it. And there was a sense that some people wanted tenant protections and some people wanted tax breaks for, for housing developers. So having them expire at the same time means that, 10 years from now, there'll be incentives for advocates of each of those things to come to the table and negotiate something new.
Yeah. And I'm curious, where do you see the housing conversation being in 10 years? I know you said, it'll be the job of the legislature at that time to kind of figure out how they want to approach things, but do you have any idea of what will be at the forefront?
I would say that we need to work very hard to address what is really a crisis at this point in our state. We have a crisis of lack of affordability, crisis of homelessness and excessive evictions, and a crisis of lack of supply for housing. So, the governor's made this point a lot. We are adding jobs to our economy pretty successfully, but not adding enough housing to keep up with the people who want to live here and work here. So I hope that 10 years from now, we're in a very different circumstance. We took very big steps now that will have the effect of increasing the supply of housing, not just in New York City, but around the state. We took some steps to ensure that tenants have rights to keep their homes and stay, in stable, in stable housing, which is very important for people's well-being. But we do need to we're going to need to continue to work to find ways to ensure that we're producing enough housing and that we're subsidizing and maintaining what we've got. So that's going to be an ongoing conversation. I do hope we've taken some very big steps in the last few years. I hope that over time we'll see the benefits of those things, and that 10 years from now people won't think that New York State is in a housing crisis.
And in dealing with the housing crisis, there were several competing interests, from tenant groups to real estate interests to labor unions. So how did that sort of impact the way that the legislature and the governor approached housing this year? Was there ever a possibility that everyone would be appeased?
No, I think that what we did is overall very positive. I sometimes say if you want to understand what we did, you have to keep two competing ideas in your head at the same time. One is that we did this very broad package which will benefit a lot of people in very significant ways. And the other idea is it's imperfect and it doesn't go as far as it should in certain respects. So there are many tenants who will not get good cause protections. There are certainly additional incentives that are going to be necessary to ensure that we build housing. So we're not done, but we took very big steps forward. And I think most parties who were in the negotiation acknowledged that there was a lot of hard work done to make sure everybody's interests were properly considered and are at least somewhat reflective in the deal we did. But it's imperfect. And I think that, I work a lot with tenant advocates, and I think a lot of folks who were fighting very hard for this are now going to be working very hard to make sure that localities implement, to make sure that tenants who are covered by it are aware of the new rights they have, and tenants that are not covered because they live in a locality where it hasn't been adopted know that they should be talking to their local government about adopting it. So it'll be a continuing work in progress. I was disappointed by several aspects of this, but at the same time, I think we took very big positive steps forward. So, I'm pleased about that.
What were the aspects that you were disappointed in?
The biggest thing, I think that the tenant protections should be broader. I think basically if you are a tenant, you should have, in most circumstances, you should have the notion in law that you shouldn't be pushed out of your home for no reason, no good reason. The other big thing that we're not doing enough of, which I've been fighting now for 5 years, is additional subsidies for rent when people are unable to afford the cost of adequate housing. So there are some very successful programs that have developed over many years, including there's a federal program called Section 8, which covers the difference between what eligible families can pay, up to 30% of their income, and the fair market rent of an apartment in their locality. That's been very successful. I've been proposing for a number of years now to expand that, to create a state version of that, basically, that would expand those benefits to many others who need them. And that's something we did not get done in this budget. And again, it's been a fight for a few years, and I think it's a fight that will continue. The other big thing is more specific. When families or individuals are facing eviction in New York City, there is a program in place that most of the time they will step in and pay the rental arrears, the amount of rent that somebody owes, if that is the reason they're going to get evicted. So there are procedures in place to make sure it's really an emergency, to make sure really the tenant doesn't have the money, make sure that there is actually, they're actually on the verge of losing their home. But in that circumstance, the government will step in. That is pursuant to state law, but it doesn't happen so effectively in most jurisdictions in the state other than New York City. So New York City did 43,000 emergency payments to prevent eviction in the last city fiscal year. Very small numbers of those happen outside the state. That is something that I fought for in this budget. We did get a $10 million pilot program that is intended to demonstrate how we can do that effectively outside the city. But I think it's going to be a continuing conversation. I think we need to make sure that pilot is implemented effectively. But really, if somebody is facing eviction and it costs, maybe they owe a few $1,000s in rent, it is it's more humane, it's more sensible, and sometimes it's more cost effective to just pay that rent and allow the person to continue to stay in their home.
And the budget also included funding for Mitchell-Lama buildings as well as NYCHA buildings. So can you unpack how the funding will be distributed and how quickly will residents in those apartments see changes to their buildings?
Yeah, we funded a wide range of capital programs that are intended to produce new housing and also maintain what we've got. There's about $1 billion in new capital funding for housing in this budget. And yes, a significant portion of that is for public housing in the New York City Housing Authority and also public housing authorities across the state, and also housing that was built under the Mitchell-Lama program, which is a state program that built affordable co-ops and rentals many years ago. Those are programs, in both cases, those are programs that we've worked with in the past. So typically we add money for them, and then there is a negotiation with the housing providers about how the money will be spent, and then the money is allocated to them. So the State Housing Agency, HCR, will be administering those programs. And I think that both the public housing authorities and the Mitchell-Lama housing owners and providers will be proposing specific capital improvements they can make, and those will be funded with that money.
And now that the budget has officially been passed, what are some of the other housing initiatives that you're hoping to focus on through the rest of the legislative session, especially as we head to elections this year?
So we did a very wide range of things already. We had been talking about doing, we did legislation around deed theft both last year and this year to make it illegal, make it a crime when someone tricks somebody into turning the deed to their home over to somebody else. We added protections already for when insurance companies are discriminating against affordable housing. Again, I mentioned we did a wide range of capital programs. So we've done most of what we started this year to do, but we have a bunch of things that are necessary to pass before the end of the year that will allow existing programs to continue effectively. Those sunsets and extenders we were talking about. There's been a longstanding effort to regulate short-term rentals, the sort of Airbnbs and their competitors around the state that my colleague Senator Hinchy has been working on. We have some continuing work to ensure that public housing authorities are held accountable, and that a lot of the capital programs that we have that have been in place for a long time that are not new in this budget have kind of the support and the terms they need to make them as effective as possible. So there's still a bunch of work. We have moved 62 different bills through the Housing Committee already this session. I expect that there's another meeting this coming week, and I expect there'll be a bunch more. So we're not done with our work, but in housing, we've certainly achieved a lot this session. And so, my colleagues will be probably taking a step back after the session and thinking about what the next session holds, what the sort of next big agenda items will be. And I've mentioned some of them, ensuring that there's rental assistance available in key, in critical circumstances. But, we'll have a new year and a new agenda coming for next session.
Absolutely. Well, certainly a lot to look forward to, and we'll have to have you back on the show to continue this ongoing conversation. But thank you so much for taking the time to connect with us today.
It's been a great pleasure to talk with you all about this. Thank you.
Thank you. And we were speaking with State Senator Brian Kavanagh, Chair of the Senate Committee on Housing, Construction, and Community Development. And for more information on the state's approach to the housing crisis, you can visit our website. That's at nynow.org. And apart from housing, another issue New Yorkers are facing is food insecurity. Amid rising inflation, many New Yorkers have turned to food pantries for groceries. But for those working at food pantries, meeting the increased demand may not be so easy because of what they say is stagnant funding from the state. We sat down with Natasha Pernicka, who is the executive director of the Food Pantries for the Capital District and the Alliance for a Hunger-Free New York, to learn more. Thank you so much for joining me today, Natasha.
I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I wanted to get into the state budget. The state budget, as we know, provided funding to the Hunger Prevention Nutrition Assistance Program in Nourish New York, but there was some criticism from advocates and people who work within the sector who feel that the amount of funding isn't necessarily enough. I wanted to get your perspective on that criticism.
Yeah, the Alliance for the Hunger-Free New York is a coalition of food pantries across the state, and I have to say we're very disappointed in the budget this year. Specifically in regards to Hunger Prevention Nutrition Assistance Program, as you said. That program has been a really critical program for food pantries. Not only does it provide funding for shelf-staple pantry items, but we also are able to purchase produce, and it allows for operating costs. I think a lot of people don't realize that pantries actually have operating expenses as well as need funds to pay for food. Most of the food that goes through the food pantry system, pantries actually pay for. It's not just relying on food drives and donations. Unfortunately, over the past couple years, food inflation has drastically risen. In fact, it's risen over 9% over the past several years. So food inflation has been much higher than typical inflation. So not only is it impacting people in their own households, which is causing more people to turn to food pantries. Across the state, we're having historically high service levels in our food pantry system. So the disappointment is that this year's budget for hunger prevention nutrition assistance has a very small increase. It's a little bit over 2%, but it's essentially stagnant or really a net loss if you consider the purchasing power that has been decreased due to inflation, at the same time having increased service levels. So really, this state budget, in our opinion, is negligent in addressing the current crisis that we're facing.
And what were your conversations like with the executive chamber and members of the legislature about the need to support food insecurity and food pantries?
I think that, this was our first year to be more active in the budget process for the state budget. And we were able to build some relationships with, assembly members, senators, and within the governor's chamber. I have to say that the disappointment is that I don't feel like we have a real champion who understands the charitable food system and where we are to fill the gaps, especially when government programs are not being invested in, even from a federal level. Right? SNAP benefits are down. We have people who get $28 a month for SNAP. $28 a month doesn't go very far. So people are turning to food pantries. And I think for a lot of folks who don't understand the charitable food system, they're like, well, just go to a food pantry, just go to a food pantry. Well, what's happening is more and more people are just going to a food pantry, and we need real dollars, real investments in order to make sure that people have the dignity of having healthy food. I think, we're building relationships. My hope is for the legislators and the governor and her staff to take a deep dive in understanding how can we all work together to move towards a hunger-free New York. One of the things that we would love for the governor to take on is, let's make New York one of the states that values food as a basic human right. The United States does not recognize food as a human right. However, we know that Maine is the first state in the United States to adopt food as a human right. And I would love to see the state dedicate resources to bring us all together, because it's not just food pantries. You know, the state is investing in moving the needle on universal free healthy meals for children, but they didn't hit that mark this year either. You know, while they sustained the funding from last year, they're still not committed to all children having access to healthy school meals. This year, we did not see the state provide supplemental SNAP incentives, which was also a disappointment. You know, Nourish New York is another great program that the state invests in. It's a real win-win for our New York State agriculture and producers. And that, again, fell short of what our hopes were, because that Nourish New York allows food pantries and food banks to purchase fresh produce, dairy, and meats from New York State producers. So it helps our economy here, and the dollars stay in New York. And we were very disappointed that that didn't hit the mark that we felt would be more appropriate to support our charitable food system in making sure people in the community have access to healthy food.
And do you see a path forward in the weeks left in the legislative session? We know that a lot of the policy issues are addressed in the budget, but there still is room outside of the budget negotiations to sort of push through legislation. So do you see a path forward?
Well, there were some legislative add-ons to HIP, NAP, and Nourish New York. We are working on setting up meetings with senators and assembly members, and we will reach out to the governor's office as well. We want to make sure that food pantries, the frontline emergency food providers in the neighborhoods, have access to the resources so that they can make their own purchasing decisions. We need to make sure that we're having the conversations now, because this isn't, you know, we don't expect a quick fix, but we do know that the wealth disparities, it's not just in New York, it's across the country, will continue, and more people are falling short of having enough resources. So I think we need to be forward thinking as a state in how we're going to address food security. There is the New York State Hunger and Food Policy Council, run out of New York State's Department of Agriculture and Markets, and I think that's a great place to have these conversations. But we really know that the budget speaks the priorities, and this year hunger was not a priority for our state, and it's disappointing. But I believe that collectively we can work together to come up with some real budget and programmatic solutions over a 3 to 5 year period where we can become a state that truly invests in food security for our population here.
And what would those solutions look like in the years to come?
It's a combination of making sure that SNAP benefits are increased and easy to access for people. SNAP's an important program because it gives the individuals and families the dignity of making their own choices about what foods they're used to eating or their kids will eat. I have very picky kids. You know, people would like to go to a grocery store and shop and choose the things they're used to eating instead of relying on the limited inventory in food pantries and food banks. Other areas for the people who are still falling short and do need to turn to the charitable food system, the Nourish New York program is an incredible opportunity again. So it not only invests in our local New York State producers, but it also gets healthy and fresh food out into the charitable food system. The universal school meals is essential. That's a no-brainer. We know that kids need access to food, and it's also important to reduce the stigma of free school so that all kids feel comfortable without having the stigma of being a free lunch kid. Those are some areas. Also, WIC benefits, you know, improving access. I do know the state has plans on making public benefits easier to navigate. However, the state has been talking about it for years and years. So maybe we can put some pressure on moving that system forward to make it easier for people, because if people are relying on federal assistance that gets through the state, having an easy way to apply. We are excited about the summer EBT program that's coming through federal. However, this new way of summer EBT does require some people to apply for the program. And there's a really quick turnaround this year. So I think, inventorying all of the food-related programs, congregate meal sites for older adults, and home-delivered meals for older adults, and food as medicine. So I'm like, there's a lot of different solutions. So it's making sure that all of the solutions that are great programs have the adequate funding for the populations that they're meant to serve. So that's number one. What do we need for all of those programs to have enough funding for all of the people who are eligible to participate in the programs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a starting point.
Well, certainly an important issue. Unfortunately, we have to leave it here for now, but we thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about this today.
Great. Thanks so much for having me today.
And we were speaking with Natasha Pernicka, Executive Director of the Food Pantries for the Capital District and the Alliance for a Hunger-Free New York. And for more information on food insecurity in the state, you can visit our website. Again, that's at nynow.org. Well, that does it for this edition of New York Now. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.
Funding for New York Now is provided by WNET,